Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Board of Selectmen of March 21st, 2023. This is going to be a hybrid meeting, and I'll read the required notice into the record momentarily. This meeting can be watched live on YouTube, but on channel 18, it cannot because there's technical difficulties dealing with the Comcast equipment. They've been notified and hopefully will rectify those problems as soon as possible. But the meeting will be recorded so that it can be played at a later time on channel 18. The notice for the hybrid meeting is as follows. This is to formally advise that as required by General Laws, Chapter 38, Sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during a state of emergency, signed into law on June 16th, 2021, as extended by special legislation dated July 16th, 2022. The Yarmouth Board of Selectmen will hold a public meeting Tuesday, March 21st, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the hearing room, Yarmouth Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access provided below. And the alternative access information is on the Yarmouth website. Please join me in the pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item is announcements, and we have, I see our town clerk, Mary, is at the podium.
Good evening, Mary Maslowski, Town Clerk. We are headed into election season, so just a few notices and reminders. Our annual town election is scheduled for May 16th, 2023. We will be doing vote by mail for that election. If anyone is looking to have a ballot mailed to them, the new application is on our webpage under the town clerk's page. You do need to renew that every single year. So if someone filed one last year, it doesn't apply for this year. So the only election that we are really having is the town. I just wanted to point that out to people. We have 5 open seats on our election calendar this year. It is 1 seat for the Board of Selectmen, 2 seats for DY Regional School District, and 2 seats on the Housing Authority. 1 is a 5-year term. The second is to fill a vacancy created when Mr. Reed passed away earlier this year. The last day to pull nomination papers is Friday at 5 o'clock. So if just a friendly announcement out there, if anyone is looking to take out nomination papers for this year's town election, the town clerk's office will be open until 5 o'clock to service them on Friday. Don't want to forget a friendly reminder about annual town meeting, which will be Tuesday, the 25th of April, being held at 6 o'clock, I believe is what you're going to call it for, at Matakey's Middle School. So just a friendly reminder for that as well. The last day to register to vote for that is Saturday, April 15th at 5 p.m. We will be open here at Town Hall in my office on that Saturday in order to take any voter registrations for individuals. They can also go online. We have a hyperlink both on our webpage and also at the Secretary of State's office to register to vote. You can also check your registration status that way as well. You've also probably seen that the census finally went out. They should be hitting your mailboxes this week. If they haven't already, they can be mailed back to us or returned to us. And there is also a Town Seal Committee questionnaire included. It does, that can be returned together with it. We will separate that out for the Town Seal Committee. And although it does have a signature line on it, if people do not want to sign it, they don't have to. So those items are all kind of our current list of current events And I'll take any questions if anybody has anything that they,
Mary, the return date for the nomination papers is generally the following Tuesday.
like Tuesday, so I believe that's the 28th
And what time would
yes,
the
5
town hall
p.m.
be receiving those up to what time?
until 5 p.m. We will be open until Tuesday, on Tuesday, March 28th until 5 p.m. to take
And
those
people have to
papers.
get, what, was it 50 certified
It's
signatures?
50 certified signatures.
Okay.
So it is, and I also failed to mention, there's a moderator position as well, so. We do have,
Right,
the
right,
moderator's
okay.
position is on the ballot as well, and I just realized I had forgotten to mention that as well.
One selectman, two school
One selectman,
committee,
two school committee,
two
two
housing
housing,
authority,
and the moderator.
and the town moderator.
correct.
All right.
Thank you
Dick,
very
anybody
much.
have any questions for Mary? No, thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Can't be reminded enough about this stuff. Thank you. Public comment. We have anybody wishing to be recognized for public comment? Vita Morris.
Vita Morris. I was going to speak on this subject 2 weeks ago, but because Mark was not present and it has a lot to do with him, actually, I waited until he's here now, and this is on the subject of the Title V change in the regulations that is so preposterous that I don't know how anybody could have been in favor of it. But anyway, I was surprised when I heard about the letter that the town was writing, a copy of which happened to be a draft, not even the final copy, was sent by Mark to Ed Allen Lambert's program on the radio, and he read some excerpts, and because he was the sender, I was sort of under the impression that he agreed with the thoughts in that letter. But then it turns out when the commissioners finally decided to chime in, and I would have thought that that was the group that should have been the first one to jump in there and on behalf of the constituents of Cape Cod and Yarmouth as such, you know, and that to come to find out that they are totally in favor of it. It says, "We write to you today to support the goals of the proposed Title V regulations." So I'm wondering just exactly where Mark stands, and especially since he is running for re-election, I believe, to this particular seat that he is sitting in right now, because I find that to be really most obnoxious and I mean, are you going to tell in your platform? Do you have the fact that the talk is of at least $30,000 for any of the if you were to have followed those regulations that they were talking about, and how many people can afford something like that? And this business of oh well, maybe we'll get some interest-free loans or something like. So what? You still owe the $30,000 or $40,000 that you have to pay up. I don't think that's a proper excuse for this. So I'm very concerned, and I was hoping that Mark would have the good sense to vacate one of the chairs that he's holding right now, because there are constant conflicts of interest for him, and he already had to recuse himself as a commissioner from the dispersal of the funds. I guess it was the COVID funds or something like that. Whatever it was a very large amount, and the commissioners, again, out of $41 million, they deigned to give the towns $10 million. And when the delegates decided that they wanted to propose that half of that amount, $20 million, be given to the towns directly, they got such a lecture from Ms. Lyons, I guess it was, about their place and what they could and couldn't say or do. It's just amazing. And when you're dealing, when you're parceling out those kind of monies, for you to recuse yourself, because otherwise you would have really been thrown off the, one of the positions, I think is, actually absolutely outrageous. And by the way, please leave the, town committees, commissions and alone. You're constantly interfering and giving your suggestions.
All right, thank you for your comments. Tom? Tom O'Nick, otherwise known as Tom Nicanello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Nicanello tonight in this very historic village, come from Bass River. And I just want to just make a couple comments. First would be to the town clerk. I did get my town seal notice and I was thrilled. I'm actually thrilled because we have more than one seal. We have ocean, we have harbor seals, and then we have our town seal. So, I mean, that's for 131 years, our town seal has been like that. And yeah, I guess it's time to make it more accurate. So I hope everyone takes it seriously and fills out the information and sends it back, because that's who we are. And I think that's who the future generation wants to be. My next comment, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, is a big shout out to all our volunteers for the parade. As you know, thanks to you folks. We had a beautiful day weather-wise. It was hardy. It was New England type. It wasn't, you know, in shorts and no shoes, but we did pull off a great event. Thanks to all those committee members and our chairman, who does a wonderful job. We did keep the dentist in town supplied very well. They're going to have some work ahead of them. And for those people that were worried about the candy, I think we did pick it all up, so there shouldn't be an issue. You know, to see those little kids on the side of the street and be enjoying what we as a wonderful community can offer is truly remarkable and has a lot of value, at least to my saying. I mean, I devote a lot of hours to it because I'm in the entertainment business and my job is to entertain people, and the young families and kids are just, you know, it's what we do. But our volunteers are outstanding. We have some tonight here that for the town volunteers, as you all know, we'd be in trouble if we didn't have volunteers for our town. Volunteers for parade, volunteers for the winter carnival. It's just extraordinary that we have wonderful citizens giving up their time for the love and devotion of our community. We used to recognize them. Hopefully one day we can get back to that. It's very important that we come together and spend some time with these people besides, you know, doing their job, and get to know them, because, you know, one day we're not going to be here. My last comment, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, is pertaining to the wonderful job that the town administration and the select board is going through. As everyone, you may have seen, you may not have seen the agenda tonight with over 450 pages, but that is remarkable work. It's remarkable work that our volunteers and people in this building and the select board can have some type of vision for us in the future. There's some hard questions in there from the finance committee and the capital committee, and they need to be answered, and they need to be processed so our future can stay stable. It's really important. But you know, without those volunteers, they're just crazy. But the one thing I did want to just make a point about in that article is the wastewater. It's extremely important. As you know, our great-grandfathers didn't have the luxury. They had some tough times with typhoid, some of the other diseases, and then we modified to what we have today. It was after the war, between 1929 and 1945, bathrooms took off. It's quite a remarkable product. Have we got all the answers? No, we don't have all the answers. Are we still learning? Yes, we're still learning, right? We have PFAS, we have nitrogen. It's a lot better than what we used to have, right? Cholera, typhoid, and typhus. That's what we were plagued with before. Now we're plagued with nitrogen and PFAS. The only way that we can protect our water supply is doing what we're doing. And we're gonna do that, and we're gonna eliminate these agents so we can actually become healthier, right? Water and air, that's what's extremely important. You can have a planet that has air, but if there's no water, there's no life. And our water is extremely important. And this article is extremely important, and I hope everybody backs behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I respond just quickly to clarify a comment made by a prior speaker?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This is concerning the DEP regulations. I want to make it abundantly clear that I have been a very strong critic of the DEP proposal. Just about everybody on this board and elsewhere is well aware of it. And I was hand in drafting the letter that the board submitted on behalf of the town of Yarmouth. I submitted that letter in draft form to other boards, suggesting that they too adopt a very similar position to that adopted by this board. Not all the boards that I had contacted actually took the same position as the town of Yarmouth, including the Board of Regional Commissioners. They took a different tact. In spite of my strong concerns, they decided to go on record with something different. So the reality is I stand behind my strong concerns. I've been very vocal in this board and in public meetings about the issues that are at hand. If anybody has a question about what I've been doing or my involvement, by all means, I have office hours every month, the first Friday every month, South Yarmouth Library. I'm there, and I get a lot of visitors, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Anyone else on public comment?
Couple of names on the TV.
Okay, let's go to the board. I can't,
Norm Holcomb and Joe Glenn.
all right, let's save Joe for last. No, I'm kidding. Joe Glenn.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can, Joe, and I'm sure that you're very happy to hear about the recent Supreme Court decision that says we can't put unreasonable restrictions on public comment, but go ahead.
Oh, is that right? I thought you were gonna say you're gonna save the best for last, but I just wanted to echo your sentiments of a week ago or last meeting, I think, in the regards to our passing of our neighbor and my colleague, John Reed, a good friend and over 40-year teacher, and his wife was a 33-year plus teacher in Yarmouth at Station Ave. So I wanted to echo those sentiments because I didn't do that before, but it's a great loss to our board and a great loss to our community. So I know that I spoke to the town administrator about it, and he had some very kind words also. So a lot of the members of the community might not know. I did want to let you know, Mr. Chairman, that the Channel 18 is, and I came in late because you weren't on Channel 18, so I only caught part of the town clerk's messages. So anything you said before that, but Channel 18 is not up and running right now, if you didn't know. So
we know that, Joe. We announced that at the beginning of the meeting, but I am told it can be seen live on YouTube.
okay, great. And then one final thing, Mr. Chairman, you're going to have the DY schools superintendent there. I will be in the audience, and you can promote me as you like if you have any question as a school committee member, but I'll be out here in the lobby waiting. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. And thank you for your kind remembrance about John Reed.
You're welcome.
Norm Holcomb. Norm, you are
Good
recognized. Can you
evening.
hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Norm.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to talk about a proposal that has been brought up and that is kind of deja vu back to when before I was on the select board to develop the property at Forest Road. In August 1985, the town meeting, it had to be a special town meeting, authorized the Board of Selectmen to transfer the 19 acres of town land to the Yarmouth Housing Authority to construct conventional or congregate living facilities at that location. That meeting had considerable discussion, and the intent of the meeting was, or the intent was to limit the development to less than 30 units of senior affordable housing. Now, I tried today to get the details of that meeting in the archives, and Mary has agreed to try to find that. Apparently it is stuck away someplace. So, but in any case, that vote was followed up by an amendment essentially in 2009. And so here it was 24 years later, and nothing had been done by the Yarmouth Housing Authority. So in 2009, an article was passed, and it said, to see if the town will vote to authorize development of affordable family rental housing in addition to affordable senior rental housing on land owned by the Yarmouth Housing Authority in South Yarmouth. And it goes yada yada, gives you the details of the land court information. So fast forward 3 years later, and residents at Captain's Village presented a petition to rescind that vote in 2009. And their point to the town was the original proposal was to construct senior housing and was for no more than 30 units. Whereas what was envisioned in after this amendment was to be was voted was that there was going to be something like 70 units at that location. Anyway, so town meeting in 2012 rescinded that amendment. So it all goes back to what was passed in 1985. And I've heard that there's been a statement that, well, the town can't do anything about that, any development on that property. But I know from some recent conversations that about 50 units are being proposed for that property, and that an RFP might go out to that effect. Now, and apparently it's not going to be limited to senior housing. Now, I've heard that the town is saying that, well, we can't do anything about that. Well, in fact, you can, because when the amendment was proposed, Article 47, to amend the original 1985 vote, it was clear to the town, it was clear to the select board, to the then town administrator, Robert Lawton, and to the legal counsel that they had to amend the original vote that took place in 1985. So it was clear to them that 1985 vote was restricted, based on all the discussion that took place at town meeting, restricted the development to senior affordable housing. If it wasn't clear to them, why the heck would they even bring an article to town meeting for approval? They just simply would allow things to move ahead. So it was very clear to the then select board and town administrator and legal counsel that in fact they had to pass an amendment to the 1985 town meeting. Well, as I said, the 2009 article was rescinded. We're back to the 1985 wording, and I just think that the town should stand behind the intent of the original town meeting article in 1985 and should restrict that development to senior housing, if anything at all. I think there are certainly very good arguments considering the fact that that property is within the water protection area of the town. The town's water is already critically endangered for a lot of different reasons. And putting 50 some odd units of new housing in one spot and having all that affluent going into that area just does not seem like a tenable development. And I think, housing authorities are bound by state statute to comply with town regulations. That means all the zoning regulations and so forth are housing authorities are bound to obey them. So I think particularly with regard to water quality, and the select board, point out to the public, are the water commissioners for the town, that the select board should take the position that, look, we don't want a substantial new development in that area. A better idea would be, take some of the excess property that's going to develop in the next year or two, either at Mattakees or ME Small, and dedicate a small amount of that or some part of that to the Yarmouth Housing Authority in exchange for that 19 acres of property, and turn that 19 acres into conservation land so that it can't be built on and will not endanger the water supply. The other issue is a moral issue. The Captain's Village area was developed at a time when the town was expanding dramatically, and town didn't have an awful lot of staff to attend to the tremendous amount of development that was going on. And I think, I can't state for a fact, but I think what happened is they lost track of what was going on in Captain's Village. Half of that development suffers from flooding on an almost annual basis, and some homes in that area have to run sump pumps 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That flooding situation has come before the town and been studied by the town a number of times. And back, I wish I could remember, I think it's 2004, the town had a study, and it would cost $4 million to alleviate the flooding in that neighborhood. A substantial development at Forest Road would increase the amount of potential flooding that could occur by putting that much into the aquifer from a development there on that site. They also would tear down trees, which just ask anyone how much water trees absorb, and those trees are protecting Captain's Village from an even worse flooding situation. The town has, I think, a moral responsibility to the Captain's Village residents to protect their homes. And if you're not going to allocate some funds to fixing the flooding problem there, then at least you can avoid worsening this situation. And that goes for the water supply as well. Don't allow a development that will worsen the water quality issues in the town of Yarmouth. So in summary, I think you have the tools available to you. I support affordable housing. I was on the Affordable Housing Trust for 3 years. We did some terrific work, including the redevelopment of the Cavalier project. And I think there's ample opportunity for other pieces of property to be developed and to be turned over to the Yarmouth Housing Authority for them to manage and to earn revenues from, without endangering the Captain's Village area any more than already exists. So I hope you'll take some action on this. I hope that if you have already approved the housing plan that the Affordable Housing Trust has proposed, that you will reconsider that approval and ask the Affordable Housing Trust to slow down, to look back at the 1985 town meeting and to go by those results, which were to limit the development of that site. But I think you have a lot of tools available to you, and I think you have a moral responsibility to the people in Captain's Village to protect them, as well as to protect our water supply in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Appreciate it.
Can I add something to what he was just saying?
Ask something,
No, just add, there,
if make it very quick, Vita.
well, there was, back in either 09 or 12, or whenever this thing had last come up, sort of, somebody asked for a study to be made of the water table in that, particular, plot of land that they're, talking about, that he was just talking about. And I was told by one of the then select persons that, the results were such that nothing would ever be allowed to be built there, period. So can somebody try to find out, what happened, with that, water table study?
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else on the screen other than Joe Glenn and Norm Holcomb? No? Okay. Next item, if anybody is here on the amendment to the entertainment license for the Big Nick's ride at the Sea Dog Brew Pub, that matter is not going to go forward tonight. We received a request through our licensing office to take that off the list. Tentatively, it's supposed to come back on May 2nd, but it has to be re-advertised again and started from scratch, so abutters will get new notices of that hearing. My understanding is that they are also going to add in that same application permission to serve alcohol on 2 additional days that they're seeking to extend their activity over for the Big Nick's ride. So I don't know if that was their motivation, but all those matters will be heard at the same time. Again, tentatively on May 2nd, but whatever date it is heard will be advertised, and abutters and those that are entitled to legal notice will be re-noticed of the hearing. So that brings us, it's always good to skip something. You can make up time. You can make up some time. Okay. So next is the public hearings, and I probably do have some notices in here to read on those, don't I? These were legally noticed hearings. Get rid of all these entertainment things. Here we go. So the first hearing is County of Yarmouth, notice of public hearing on operating budget and capital improvement plan, acting under Yarmouth Town Charter, section 7-5. A public hearing will be held on March 21, 2023 with the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and Capital Budget Committee to receive comments on the FY 2024 town and school budgets and capital improvement plan. The hearing will be held in the hearing room of Yarmouth Town Hall and via Zoom beginning at 6 p.m. Complete copies of the FY 2024 budget and capital improvement plans are available beginning March 10th, 2023 on the town's website, www.yarmouth.ma.us. So that's it for that notice. So we are ready to proceed, whenever you are. The public will have an opportunity to ask questions and to comment at this hearing. And Finance Committee, Capital Budget, Cape Cod Technical Regional School, the Dennis Yarmouth Regional High School, and the District Improvement Financing, otherwise known as DIF. All those matters will be open for public input.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie Cox, Chair of the Finance Committee. Nice to see you all. I'm joined by Richard Simon, a recent addition to the Finance Committee, who has graciously volunteered himself to be part of the Executive Committee as our, did we decide on secretary or clerk? But he's really been very helpful since he joined. And of course, our Assistant Town Administrator, who is keeping us on track throughout the budget process. And we've been so grateful to have Bob's participation throughout. And before we get going, I also just want to say, while he wasn't part of this budget process, we are so grateful to Ed Centeo for all of his years of service to the town. And I know certainly for me, as when I was first starting on the Finance Committee, he was tremendously helpful, especially as we were going into the pandemic. It was certainly a learning curve there. So you have in your packets a couple of items. One is the memo from myself to the Chair of the Board of Selectmen that references our votes. I am told we have a transcription error on the last item. It should read 1-5 rather than 5-1 for the vote. And I'm happy to go over any of those that you all would like. You have also included in your packet our report to town meeting, which really goes over a lot of this. So I'm going to start going in, unless there's anything that you wanted to start with.
Whatever you wish, Stephanie.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chairman. So we started off with our trying to continue the standardization of the presentations from the town departments, something that had been going on for a couple of years, but we tried to update and get a little bit more consistent. So it includes sort of some of the typical questions, but we also have been adding some other items in there over the past couple of years. One being, especially as we are always going to be faced with revenue challenges, are there any revenue producing items that your departments can do? And the example I always use is the town of Barnstable offers regional services for weights and measures and does it for the rest of the towns, including us. So those questions we will continue to ask. Another one, just after having some surprising transfers come in towards the end of last fiscal year, we've been consistently asking department heads mid-year as they come in for the budget, how are you doing for this current fiscal year? Are there any unanticipated budgetary problems that we should be aware of, that we should be on the lookout for? It's always good for us to know and be able to anticipate that. And one of the other newer questions that we asked this year was about how are you defining success? Because while we don't have any desire to create busy work for the town departments, we have noticed that there's not necessarily there may be some key performance indicators that they're using internally, but we don't know what they are. So a lot of times when we get data from them, there isn't context. There isn't context of this is what it was last year or the year before. This is what our benchmark is, et cetera. So we're not asking anyone to go out there and necessarily develop a standardized set of KPIs, but we are asking that whatever you might be using internally, that you share that in future meetings with the finance committee so that we're all on the same page. So as we went through this budget, Bob's been doing a great job with meeting your goals that you have laid out, as well as the goals that we have laid out over in our last year's report. And we're looking at a relatively level funded budget. There are a few exceptions, and I will say for myself, for myself, I will say I am pleased to see that we are kind of moving away from what I think was a period of austerity that hasn't helped us with being able in the long run to be in a good position financially, as well as in terms of delivering services. So I see the changes that the town administrator and the assistant town administrator are putting forth in terms of making sure that you have the right support staff in place and you don't have department heads doing minutes and other things like that are just not the highest and best use of those individuals, as being great progress. So I'm not going to read these verbatim, but the things I'll just call out, we have some inflation impacts. The school budget is 6% higher than last year. And that was certainly a cause for concern, but thankfully the Governor Healy's House One budget that just came out in early March puts quite a bit more in local aid that keeps that cost under 2.5%. But it is something that we have to take a look at, though. From what I've been reading, it looks like the Healy Driscoll administration, as well as the legislature, have decided to commit to some ed reform legislation that they did a year or two ago that will consistently increase the funding for schools, which is something to be certainly grateful for, given how modest our contribution is from the state. Let's see. We've got some new firefighters, a couple of new folks at DPW, town clerk's office. Another one that, again, I think is a great addition here is having an additional communications person. Tonight's lack of being live on TV being all the evidence I'd say that you need for this position, but also, I think one of the things that we have been seeing over the past couple of years is, we have this decline in newspaper subscriptions and actual newspaper presence that, and therefore the cost of advertising in those vehicles has been going up. So that's an additional cost for the municipality. And then we have, so aside from that fiscal cost, we have the intangible cost of fewer people being aware of what is going on in the town. I certainly am not going on a daily basis onto the town's website. I don't know many people who are. And so having someone who can do some proactive communications, I think, is really going to be better for the overall health of our civic engagement. So here are a few other general comments, observations that as we were going through this process. I mentioned the KPIs. Consistency with indirect allocations. This is just something that, as we have this change in consistency in Bob and Bill's leadership in developing the budgets, this is something that we hope over time can be taken a look at. But, one of the things that's been noticed, again, thanks to my colleague, Richard Simon's keen eye. He really has a great eye for the numbers. I tend to look at the big picture, and so we make a good team. There are some departments that will have OPEB in their budgets, others that won't. There's just some inconsistencies that we've noticed kind of throughout. So if you're comparing apples to apples, the DPW budget or the police budget to the community development budget or the library budget. It's just very hard to do. So that's just something for us to keep an eye on for the future. Similarly, just getting departments consistent with providing wage details for us for the budget. That has been a little bit of a struggle that we hope we are setting the expectation for next year that everyone should be consistent with providing that. I think you all are familiar with the matrix report that was looking at the police and fire back in what, 2017?
Yes.
So 2017 or thereabouts. And there were a number of items that were identified as cost savings, things like having a consolidated dispatch, et cetera, that we will continue to raise as issues, especially now that we have a new police chief and a new fire chief. Another item that we think will be helpful, just good governance, is transparency and accountability. One of the things that I think, again, with making sure we have the appropriate staffing within town hall to make sure that this stuff is, that we're on top of things, but making sure that we have a finance committee page, which, thank you, Bill. We recently had one updated that has the correct information, but making sure we're having all of our documents and packages up there for the public to be able to examine. As well as one of the things that we recommend is that we take a look at some point over the next year or two about purchasing OpenGov. If you look at the town of Brewster's website, which I'm sure Mark Forrest is very familiar with, you know, that you can get all layers of information very easily. And it's just something for us to take a look at when it comes to, again, that transparency and accountability. And then the last item on this slide is the water rates. So this is, again, we have just a couple of typos in our report. One references the town of Falmouth. I think we meant to just say more generally that other towns have an approach to their water rates that there's more of a disincentive to overuse water. And sort of how this conversation came about is, and again, if I want to clarify that our vote for the petition, Article 36, was actually 1-5, not 5-1. So we were against that. And the conversation that came about there was last fall town meeting when we had this discussion about being in a drought, making sure that there is a way to monitor and enforce over usage of sprinkling, brought up the broader conversation of that's not the only determinant of overusing water. And again, Richard, who is someone who has really dug into the details and taken a look at what are our water rates, what are how are we pricing it? So he can explain a little bit better. Do you mind if I just hand it over to you? Just maybe 30-second overview.
30-second overview.
You're gonna have a minute.
Okay. So there is some tremendous resources at the state level that talks about water pricing strategies in general. So there's two big concepts that they support. One is a meter rate, which includes essential water support. So you don't get charged for the first like 30,000 gallons because that's considered essential water. But then the rate for any volume over that is at a very high rate. So for example, Falmouth is at $7.50 per thousand, I believe, as opposed to our maximum rate, which is $3.20. So it's really significant difference. The other thing that the state includes in their water pricing strategy is considering, much like utilities, where they have a summer rate and a winter rate. So electricity or natural gas, depending on the season, which is peak, you have a higher peak season rate. So those are just two of the concepts that were included in the state recommendations. And that's available.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Richard. So that concludes our overview of the budget. There are a couple there. I do want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the big ticket item on our town meeting warrant.
We have a big ticket item.
We do, yeah.
Wouldn't happen to be about $207 million, would it?
Sounds just about right.
Right
And change, yeah. So, you know, the Board of Selectmen, the town administration, the finance committee, and I'm saying this more for the public than really for the Board of Selectmen, but you know, we have been united in the fact that we have to stop kicking the can down the road when it comes to wastewater. Not only is it, are we not being good stewards of our environment or our economy, but fiscally, it makes absolutely no sense. So we're very pleased with the yeoman's work that Bill has done in along with Jeff Colby and our consultants and coming up with a really great model and funding sources. There are a couple of other suggestions that just out of an abundance of caution, and as we look further on down the line to just take a look at, some of which we understand are already being investigated, such as the EPA WIFIA funds, taking a look at the cost if we could extend the funding beyond 30 years, and then a state opt-in legislation on a model water and sewer commission. Those are just some recommendations for us to take a look at. But for the public, I think it's really important for us to be very clear that the proposed, and there's some discussion about it tonight, the proposed Department of Environmental Protection pending regulations really offer communities a very clear choice. A watershed permit, you know, going with a community approach to solve the wastewater problems, such as what we are pursuing. Or if you live in a nitrogen sensitive area, DEP is essentially going to force homeowners to upgrade their septic systems. Even if you upgraded yours, you know, 3 years ago, you'd have to upgrade it to a new, more expensive, innovative alternative system within 5 years. And the finance committee is particularly concerned about the impact that would have on our seniors, our low income households, how that could lead to an economic dislocation. It is the approach of solving our wastewater problem lot by lot makes absolutely no sense when we compare the cost. So the bottom line, again, for the residents at home, for the homeowners at home, wondering what does all of this mean to me? The state, because we're in violation of the EPA Clean Water Act, because this has been a long protracted legal battle going on with DEP. The state is going to force us to stop kicking the can down the road when it comes to wastewater. The state is forcing us to take action, and it is going to cost money. That is the reality. The question is do we go with a more costly approach to it, or do we go with the town's approach, which is to save us money? And the town's approach is going to save us money, save homeowners money in the following ways. If you look at the timeline, having to upgrade in the next 5 years versus depending on what phase you're in, sometime over the next 30 years, and costs are amortized over that period, that's a really compressed time period. That's going to be more expensive. As an individual homeowner, you're not eligible for zero interest state revolving fund loans. You're not eligible for all of the different economies of scale and the loan products and grants. The county wastewater fund, you know, as an individual homeowner, you can't apply for that. Whereas the town can and can get that savings that goes into that great plan that Bill has put together. And, you know, another thing that I don't think people really talk about as much is if you as an individual homeowner upgrade your septic and say you go through the county loan program, and you later sell your property, you've got to pay that upgrade loan off at the time of sale, as opposed to sewer where the cost is passed on to the next owner. So regardless, that it's really just, there's no choice here. This is common sense. The approach of phase one is not is an incredible approach. I'm actually seeing the pie chart that Bill's got, which I think he'll probably talk about later. And it's something that we at this point have to do. It's a fiscally responsible approach, not only for the town, but for the taxpayers. And the finance committee stands by this proposal for town meeting. With that, I will take your questions.
Thank you. I'll first go to the board, then we'll go to the public and then back to the board if they have anything else based on public input. Mark, you have any questions or comments?
No, I'd like to, I'm going to defer until we hear.
We hear from the
Yeah.
public?
Yeah.
Dan?
No questions at this time.
Okay.
Appreciate questions
Peter?
Great work. Thank you.
Yeah, a great report. A lot of good recommendations, but I'll hold up to hear what the public has to say.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the public? I see a hand. The hand belongs to Vita Morris.
Vita Morris, Ms. Cox, when you were speaking about the wastewater matter, I think I heard you say the word consultants in the plural. What are we talking about here? How many?
I'm not
Excuse me,
sure.
Vita, I didn't quite hear that part of your question where you said something is in the plural. What was it? What was
Word consultants,
consultants plural? Oh, I see,
our
okay.
favorite people these days.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it's really about the team that they have at CDM. They have different specialties, so there's a plural there, and then we've been working with DIF consultant to make sure that all the numbers are accurate, who has been working directly with the assessor. It's my understanding that's pretty much the body of people we're working with at this time. CDM, who we've typically been working with, who the DPW has been working with, and they have various specialties within their team. So you probably would use plural in the word consultants, and then our DIF consultant who's pretty much wrapped up their work and making sure we're hitting the right targets and numbers.
So this.
I think the answer is that he's not just talking about the technical consultants for wastewater, but also people that they consult with respect to funding formulae and things like
Right.
that.
For the diff, it was very specific. So other things we're working on our own. Eventually, we'll probably work with a team on the betterment as we get closer to this sort of billing cycle. We've been able to address many of those issues internally.
I think you'll find out later, hopefully you'll find out later in the presentation that there's a lot of different funding sources that are going to go into this. And they're consulting with different people and groups on different aspects of this, not only engineering and construction, but also funding measures.
So a lot of these so-called consultants are not on a retainer basis, is that it? I mean,
No.
they're just as needed or something like that?
If I may, they're a contract basis. So the diff consultant is just there until we finish the document, and we're pretty close to that. When we move to the betterment consultant, they'll be there until we finish that contract. So it is not on a retainer basis for either one of those. And CDM is, I'm sure, there are other people that can give more detail, is there until we go through the process of design and as per their contracts we've already issued.
Thank you for your question. I'll just also respond by just saying, I know that sometimes in government, we hear the word consultants and think that it's a boondoggle. I will say that going back to my earlier comments about the importance of allowing department heads and leadership within the town to be able to specialize and manage all the work they have in front of us. There is only so far that we can go without having additional staff people on staff. And, unless we want to hire a team of people who are dedicated 100% of the time to crunching the numbers on wastewater financing or developing wastewater plans or what have you, carry all of the overhead that goes along with that. Making outsourcing to consultants is the only fiscally prudent option besides that. So I think in this case too, especially when we're going into something so important, such a big investment for the community, we need to get it right. And we need to work with people who this is what they do all day.
You could add that Bill Scott alone has saved us more than his salary in consultants.
Don't talk like that. He'll want more money.
And we should probably give it to him.
It's a financial detriment. We should, no raises. Okay, anybody else have a question or comment on this? The Finance Committee? Does anybody else want to comment on anything that was brought up?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thanks. And I too want to join with my colleagues in thanking you for all the time and energy that you put into this. Being on the Finance Committee is not an easy job, and so your work is appreciated. I do cringe when I hear that in Yarmouth we've been kicking the can down the road. Maybe we haven't come to a resolution, but I'm not sure I'd call it kicking the can down the road. I think we've been trying, and that's been the challenge. We've tried and failed. Now we're trying again. And I think the thing that I think is important to reflect on is that we've actually been listening to the voters. We've been listening to the people in the community that have been telling us that maybe we shouldn't be paying for this on the backs of the taxpayer, that we should phase it, do more in getting outside support, and maybe finding a way to get the users to really pay more of a share and actually the financing of the project, particularly in the business community. And I think that's one of the things that's unique about the wastewater proposal that's before us at this town meeting, is that roughly 85% of the cost that's left after you deduct all the grants and all the funding, all the loans, all the 0% financing, and all of the forgivable financing that ultimately turns out to be a grant. After you basically take out all the funding that we're going to get, the remaining portion, which is roughly 15% of the overall cost, all right, of that 15%, the vast majority of that cost will be pretty much borne by the business community. All right. Phase one largely focuses on 28 from one end to the other. And so this is vastly different than anything that the voters in Yarmouth have seen before. I think this is one of the most creatively designed projects, creatively financed. And I think what it does is it really focuses on a minimal burden to the average resident. So I think, yes, we did spend time exploring regional options with the other towns that we thought that could, well, if we had gone forward, if the other towns had wanted to go forward, we would have saved a substantial amount of additional money. But the reality is we couldn't wait any longer for the towns to figure out what they're going to do. The other thing that is, I think, really exciting about this proposal is that it keeps the door open for other regional partners. And anytime you keep the door open with other regional partners, you also have the opportunity to bring in other money and other resources, which is another strength for the project. So I think the town has done an incredibly, and I would share your comments that we've done a great job with our team, including our consultants, in crafting something that really makes the most sense for the people of Yarmouth. The reality is, if we say no, if we do what we did last time, we say no. Actually, what no means is actually no will mean something different this time. No will mean that we're saying no to working together as a town to do something. But we will inadvertently be saying yes to each homeowner south of Route 6 having to install a $50,000 IA system that for many people won't solve the problem. All right. And if we want to talk about regulations that don't make sense, well, that's part of what we're talking about. But nonetheless, something's coming down the pike. And the reality is that if we do nothing, then individuals will be on their own, having to spend a significant amount of additional money to take on this problem themselves. So the reality is that financially, it's best that we come together as a community, work together, and support this Article 18 at the town meeting, so that we can basically not only make a step forward, but basically save the residents of Yarmouth a huge financial burden that is coming at them. So that's what I think this is all about. And I really appreciate your comments, and I'm looking forward to working with the Finance Committee at town meeting and this board to help make the case to the people of Yarmouth that financially, the proposal that's before them is the strongest and most sound financial decision that they can make as individuals.
Dan?
Thank you.
Dorcas?
I'm also, just to reiterate again, great job, all the time that you put into this, and you've put together an excellent presentation for us today, and hopefully the folks will be able to see it on Channel 18 later.
Or on YouTube.
Or YouTube. Thank you very much.
Peter?
In addition to what Selectman Forrest indicated, the new system, if it were to be put in by the individuals, it also has annual maintenance, annual electricity costs, annual inspections. And the inspections, as of right now, is supposed to be done by the health department in the town. There are over 12,000 septic systems that would have to be inspected annually, which would mean that we would have to hire 3, 4, maybe 5 people just to do all those inspections. So again, number 18 saves everybody a lot of money and a lot of headache. And again, a great job, and your comments as to what should be done to help follow and, to get things apples to apples, very, very well taken, and they should very much be worked on. Also, your comment on rolling stock, I find that very important because it's a very expensive item for the town. It should be very consistently down and run. And again, thank you for all the work.
I too want to thank you for your work and your presentation here tonight, and the materials that you've provided us. I pretty much am in accord with Mark's comments, so I won't go through them all, but the reality is, when you talk about kicking the can down the road, I think it goes to whether the glass is half empty or half full. If you look at this historically, yes, I think it has been kicked down the road, because there was a time this could have been done with a lot of state money for cheap.
Federal money too.
And, but to Mark's point, we in good faith tried to arrive at a regional solution with Dennis and Harwich, and had every reason to expect that we could come up with a regional plan. The cost of this septic facility itself wasn't where the savings was. It was in the ongoing operation and maintenance, which would have been millions of dollars for all of the participants. But as this got delayed or got bogged down, the estimated cost went from about $160 million to $207 million. And we just couldn't afford that kind of delay and that kind of project escalation any longer. So to Mark's point, there's a lot of creative financing. There's a tremendous amount of work that's been done to keep this project off of the tax rolls and to put a cap on betterments to the residents that are concerned about, well, what's this going to cost me in the long run? And we're estimating, and these figures aren't, I don't think you can get intractable figures. You can only at this point have a cost estimate, because we have never done anything like this before. But probably for a 2 or 3 bedroom home over a 30-year period, about $15,000. Now, what's good about that is that once you're locked into a central collection system, that's all you're going to have to worry about, that $500 bill or $520 bill every year. Whereas if you have to do an innovative and alternative system, even the state can't give you numbers. They'll throw all kinds of crazy numbers out there, but they don't know, because what DEP wants you to do is when you replace it, to replace it with the most advanced available technology that's in existence at that time. And as you know, with technology, it constantly changes, it constantly gets better, and it constantly gets more expensive. In addition to that, once you do an INA system, that doesn't mean that system will last you forever. You may end up, I don't know what the useful life of those systems are, but 20 years later, 30 years later, you might be putting another one in at that time for 2 or 3 times the cost of the first system. Whereas with the town, you're not going to have that concern. So nobody likes to spend this kind of money, let's be honest. But when you look at the alternatives, I don't think they're really, it makes much sense. If Murphy's Law is correct, when you need to replace your system is when you're going to be able to ill afford to do it. It's going to be the same time you need a roof or the same time you need a furnace. And you're not going to be able to go out and get, we have another article that we're trying to get the betterment rate to be 2%. Now, I would borrow all the money I could get my hands on for 30 years, 50 years, 100 years at 2%, because I'm betting that that's a pretty good rate in the long term. And it's going to be well under the rate of inflation. So there's just so many positives that I see out there. And don't forget the overriding question, which is environmental integrity. This has got to be done. This is not an optional thing. It's either going to be done by a system that we have control over, that we have input into, that we have management over, or it's going to be done according to some oppressive regulations where everybody's on their own. And the townwide system is going to be more efficient than these other piecemeal approaches to wastewater. So like Mark, we look forward to working with you folks at town meeting to try to bring these points of interest up to the voters so that they have really a clear understanding of what the alternatives are and what the most advantageous solution is for them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a couple of things I just want to piggyback on based on your comments and other members. So you're absolutely right. The board is absolutely right in terms of the value to homeowners of phase one. One thing we didn't mention in here, but having phase one, the biggest cost is developing the plan. And so that in terms of, ratepayers, betterments, the people who are paying that in town are the business community. That is a huge savings. And again, I applaud everyone who's been involved in coming up with the financing to be able to make that work, as well as, the visitors who come here and, stay in short-term rentals and hotels and motels, which makes sense. Another point I just want to add again for the folks watching at home, that your point, Mr. Chairman, about you don't know if the system's going to last. Well, the other point is, what if we discover another pollutant, right? What if we have something besides the nitrogen that we need to clean up, PFAS, something else, right? Then you got to go in lot by lot, and you as an individual homeowner have to pay to clean up that on site, as opposed to if we have the plant, then we can have the town address it on the back end and clean up whatever that is. So again, thinking about not only the upfront costs, but the long-term costs and the value of your property, this is the best approach. And certainly, I'm sorry if my comments were taken as we as the town. I think the town Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee has been right there with you as far as, we can't wait for other towns. So agreed that, you have been listening. I just look at it as I'm 40 years old, and I think for almost my entire life, Cape Codders have been talking about the wastewater problem that we have. And we had federal money available in the 1980s that we could have had almost 100% of it paid for by someone other than the homeowners now. And now we've waited. Well, so when I say we, I mean we collectively as Cape Codders. We have kind of stuck our heads in the sand. We've ignored opportunities after opportunities to pay a minimal amount, and now it's ballooned. And if we wait longer, it costs more, but it's not only if we wait longer, it costs more. It's we can't wait longer because the state's saying, nope, this is the end of the line. This is the end of the road. So with that being said, I thank you all for your comments and all of your work with regards to the budget, the town administrator and all of his department heads, and of course, Bill, who has just been working like mad on the budget, on the diff, on capital budget, which you're going to hear about shortly, along with our great capital budget committee. So thank you. And as always, should you all have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
I think Vita has something else
Just
before.
just a point of order. Is there anybody on Zoom who might want to come in?
I don't know. Do you see anybody up there, Bob? I don't. No hands raised. Thank you for reminding us of that, Vita. But we don't see anybody. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate all your work and your presentation.
Actually, one thing, if I could just add, I completely forgot, but we have had a couple of transitions within the committee, and I just want to thank Nate Ladley, who recently has had to resign due to some family and health issues. He's been fantastic, as well as some of our other committee members. We have a great committee, and we look forward to the appointments process in the spring, making sure that we have a few more members as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Capital Budget Committee report and overview. This will also be the opportunity for the public to ask questions or make comments if they wish after the presentation is before us.
Good evening.
Good evening.
See you all. I'm going to start with introducing our committee again, just reminding you of our players. So I'm Judy Tarver and I'm the chair of this. And I'm calling Sandy Fife my co-chair. We kind of have that same relationship that they described in the FinCom with. I'm kind of the big picture person, and Sandy's. Sure thing. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, so I tend to be the big picture person, and Sandy is into the weeds with the details. We also have our at-large members, Lindsay Pietro, Kathy Hislop, and Kurt Sears. And we have representatives from both the planning board, that's Will Rubenstein, and the FinCom, George Perkins. And our guide on the side here, Bill Scott. And we've had consistent support from Pam and Mary Alice in the main office all through our process. So we're very grateful to them. So we do have a PowerPoint for you today, and we're just going to go through this as part of the public hearing. So reminding you of the purpose of our presentation today is that we did hand off the document in December, and then the school information came in, and then we incorporated that and came to see you in February. And so now we're providing another overview of the document, and that was in your packet, the complete report and all the details of the projects that were submitted, part of the 400+ pages for tonight. All right. So our role is that we are charged with reviewing all requests for capital items and making recommendations to the FinCom, to you, the board, and to town meeting. And the definition of a capital item is anything that typically has a minimum value of $10,000 or a useful life of over 5 years. So examples of capital items would include buildings, vehicles, computer equipment, roadways, sidewalks, waterways, and construction costs. The committee's recommendations take the form of a 5-year capital improvement plan and a 10-year facility plan. And those serve as the town's planning documents. Each year, these items are budgeted for and are presented then to town meeting as the capital budget. The capital budget is separate from the town's operating budget. And the funds that are going toward recurring expenses, salaries, employee benefits, and office expenses should be in the budget. And this has been something we've talked to you about for a few years, and we're really making good progress in moving these items over to the operating budget. I might say that again because it was a recurrent theme. Okay, so the process. We did use this cloud-based portal this year, and that was a new system for us, and it allowed entry, rating, and management of the projects by us and by the departments. They entered their information, their supporting documents, their bids, their photographs, all kinds of data can go in there. Then the town administrator reviewed the projects and sent the recommendations to the CBC via the portal. So we were able to see in there what Bob was recommending to us. So that was nice. The system facilitates more rapid movement of the process. And that means that we were able to see fall town meeting articles, where in the past we were kind of in a race with fall town meeting. We were just gearing up for annual town meeting, and then preparations for special town meeting in the fall were happening. But this year, because of, we were able to capture that activity. So now we can track everything that's submitted. And what's really nice is the system holds those things so that it's not just something that went to town meeting, it was voted on and it's gone. It's in there and we can track it. So we used, where did that go? So we did a rating system, and did we skip the slide there? No, okay. Okay. So this is our overall process. We as individual members can access what the departments entered, what was forwarded by the town administrator, and then we can provide our own rating and comments. And we can see each other's rating and comments. So if you didn't think of something, somebody else might have written down something and go, oh, yeah, maybe I should have considered that. We also continued our liaisons approach, where we have committee members assigned to the various departments and divisions, and they go out, tour sites, listen, have individual meetings, and it's a good way to get background information, and also to they give us information, but we're able to say to them, okay, be prepared to discuss your funding a little bit more detailed than what you had. So it's a nice preparation that makes the CBC meetings more efficient. And then we used our new rating system, and that was facilitated by the software. So we had two major criteria, and they're weighted: significance and readiness. And the significance was weighted at 70%, readiness at 30%. And there were very specific criteria, which we presented to you when we were here in February. And we can mix and match scores for projects. So you don't have to rate the readiness high and the significance high. It could be very, very significant, but not ready at all. So that could, and these are the titles that the groups have: essential, desirable, acceptable, and deferrable. So we're going to show you the essential in detail. So an essential project would be described in these ways. The significance would be a very high priority, projects that are required that we need to complete them. We need to renovate a major public improvement. They're projects that will remedy a condition dangerous to the health, safety, and welfare of the public, PFAS, or projects which will provide facilities for a critically needed community program there, or that are in response to state or federal mandate, and that have available other sources of funding which will not be available at a future date. So that's kind of a pressure. If there's money available now, let's go for it. And then the readiness of the project itself. Is it clearly described? Are there plans? Are there studies, cost estimates, other detailed documentation that shows us that this project is ready to go and that we can schedule it into the plan? The project is an integral part of a larger long-range program, not something that just popped up, and how it relates to other projects, how things are coordinated, how they're prioritized, how they relate to the town goals. So that's just an example. And then those things exist for the other three categories as well. So here we have that big picture of funding sources over 10 years. So you can see the sources of funding. And we're actually talking about the second column, fiscal year 2024. And what we just kind of want to capture here is that those first couple of columns are very well populated. And then as we go out, sometimes we don't know as much in those out years. But that's one of the reasons that we want to have good plans so that we can start to populate those columns. So now this is actually that same chart, only just the first 5 years, so you can see them a little bit better. And you can also see that this is much more populated. We know much more about what's going on in the next 5 years. We also can see our big, oops, yeah, here we are. You know, where our big ticket items are. Down in wastewater, water enterprise, those are big ticket items. And then this is the last 5 years. And you've seen this slide before. So this is looking at funding sources. So you see the dollar amounts and then all the various funding sources that we have. And you see that big pillar down there under wastewater, which is that beautiful program that you've just spent so much time talking about and why it's so complicated. And there it is, so large. And then when we go to the next slide, we take that out so we can see what's going on in the rest of the town budget. And again, water enterprise, and water being our important resource. So there's a lot of energy there. So what we want to do here is talk about spreading out the projects by showing the project stages from engineering to the final construction. We really are trying to encourage looking at the 10 years going out. And again, rolling stock, we should see rolling stock in all 10 years that's based on a replacement plan. This is really coming into play nicely. The last couple of years, we folded in a couple of leasing programs for police cruisers and using leases for other rolling stock within the town. So this is helping to populate that going out the 10 years because we know what those 10-year leases are. We're saying, okay, if we spread this cost out, it's anticipated, there it is, rather than looking at vehicles that are coming up here and there. So we'd like to see a design and preliminary plans for buildings rather than the general HVAC repair account for emergencies. And I think Bob took care of that, right? So the HVAC account was moved over. It's in the budget, right? Okay. Where we were getting that under capital. and it's ongoing, it's unpredictable, it doesn't have clear projects assigned to it. So it needed to be someplace else. Here we have our present year, the year we're talking about, 2024 in the center, and we're looking at the capital improvement program list by funds. Smaller version. We've just looked at it for 10 and 5, so this is just comparing. So this is a real snapshot. Oh. Say that again? Yeah, just a reminder that the items that we addressed at special town meeting in the fall are actually in 2023 fiscal year. They're not. So even though we've just seen them, they show up there. We good?
Yep.
Okay. So kicking off from that, from special town meeting, what our experience this fall showed us that the information that we have now is far more comprehensive, and it's overall of a really much higher quality. What's coming to us, we can really see what's going on. The information includes project schedules. It includes plans for funding. You heard from FinCom that they had kind of a new set of questions that they wanted to ask every department, and that was true for us as well. You know, we really kind of came down very, very clearly that we want to know, what are your plans for funding things? And have you looked outside? So we had our little questions that needed to be addressed as well, and we got the information. The system also provides improved communication and documentation. So the documentation is there. You can see it, we can see it. Things are supported. And what I thought was really important was that it demonstrates the continuity of the projects over time. So we don't have projects popping up because this was available, or this piece of equipment maybe seemed necessary because we had a lot of tree damage. But now we see requests coming in as part of a longer plan and fitting into our overall service that we need to provide. That was a very, very nice outcome of what we did this year. So we're continuing to clarify the projects which are addressed in our work with the desired result of further refining the town's CIP. I think you saw in this year's CIP a different flavor to it and different level of detail. Not to say better, worse, but it was definitely different level of detail. And it's moving toward being a pure capital project. Again, our thanks to everybody at the town. All the department and division heads were very generous with their time with us, sharing information, answering questions, and people at town hall as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we didn't have many or any board questions the first time around, I'm gonna go to the public this time first. Does anybody in the public have questions or comments? Chris Greeley.
Chris Greeley, it wouldn't be a meeting without my saying something. I have to tell you how impressed I am tonight with the incredible amount of work that clearly has taken place on the part of town personnel and volunteers in this community. This is really extraordinary. I mean, I've been here since 1981. I've been a pretty active town meeting member and try to come to all these meetings and sit through things. And it is so clearly evident when you use the words in their higher quality, this really has taken place. I just felt I needed to mention that. This is an extraordinary set of presentations tonight, and I think is really going to be very, very helpful with some of the very complex and very costly decisions that we have to make as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
On the Article 16 about the free cash number, items 21 and 22 refer to the senior center. And in the past, we have had renovations for the senior center have been there, but then they disappear off the warrant before we go to town meeting. So I'm wondering, are these gonna still be on the warrant? Can we vote on this at town meeting?
Does anybody have a response to that?
They are on the warrant in the general article for all the CIP items, my understanding.
They are, and are they gonna stay on there?
We're with you. We're definitely with you.
Okay,
The process is that by, I think next week, March 28th, the Board of Selectmen will be taking their final recommendations on the town meeting warrant. At that time, it will be published. And we have heard nothing but the complete support. In fact, the Board of Selectmen, I think, have tasked us to ensure that those items related to the senior center be on the warrant. So we followed the direction of the board.
okay, and everyone realizes this meeting is being taped. Okay, thank you.
Well aware of that, and you should also know that you're on the tape as well. No, that's a priority item. I don't think you have anything to be concerned about there. Anyone else?
No hands are up online.
We have some people online?
No.
We don't. Okay. Anyone in the audience? No? How about board members, Mark?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the previous speaker for taking my question and getting an answer. As you might recall, we spent an inordinate amount of time at our last meeting talking about the senior center. So I appreciate the fact that we don't have to bring that up again tonight. So I too want to echo the comments of Ms. Greeley about the capital improvement program and the way and the detail and the thoroughness and the way in which it's been organized. I would have to say this is probably the best document and the best program that I have seen in all my years working and serving in the town of Yarmouth. It's an incredibly impressive program. I also have to give kudos to our finance team. And I know earlier tonight, there was some kudos to Mr. Centio. The fact that it's great to have a program and it's great to have it well organized and well thought out, but it's also great to have some money to be able to work with. And the reality is that over the years, Yarmouth has really pinched. And now we're seeing the fruits of a tremendous amount of work by our team in the town administrator's office, but also our finance team as well. Together, this effort has now resulted in a program that is incredibly well thought out, but also one that we can now start to finance. And I'll tell you, it is such a relief to see us be able to actually finance things that we need to do. And because, as you know, for so long, the needs were growing, but our ability to finance them seemed to stay stagnant, or sometimes we'd be going financially, we'd have to tighten the belts even further. And I'm not suggesting that we're not tightening our belts financially. It's just that we've made some very prudent decisions about how we manage our finances so that we can invest resources into this program. So once again, thank you so much for all of your hard work. And it's a great team, you folks and Bill. I noticed that this document has a few more words in it, a little bit more verbiage in it than the prior documents. I know Mr. Scott had something to do with that. But again, it's well written. It's very, very thoughtful. It's very
It's a good thing
comprehensive.
you didn't have any input. It'd be an encyclopedia.
That's the pot in the kettle.
There you go. Okay. All right, I'm done. All right, I'll stop right there.
No, I'm good. I always appreciate the amazing work that you people are doing, especially this latest iteration. Thank you. This is a real tool for us to go forward, and it couldn't be more timely. With this wastewater project, having this kind of detail and this kind of planning tool is just imperative, and you've given it to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Dorcas?
I think with this presentation, you certainly left no questions. I mean, I love, in fact, down to the detail of the pictures of each of the items. It's superb. You can,
And those are provided by the departments, so that's what they're uploading. So it's a lot of participation across the town, not just our committee by any means.
I think that people could say that they really can see very clearly what the capital budget is this year and understand what the capital budget is this year. Excellent job, and your work has really paid off. And thank you, Bill. I know you played a big part in this too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorcas. Peter.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody, especially in the fact that you've defined capital projects, which is extremely important. It makes it very easy for people on the board and people in the public to understand. And also the rating system also makes it quite easy to figure out why you're doing this, what's important, and what can be deferred. It's a great document. And I know at previous town meetings, there's been some ranting and raving as this is not really a capital budget project. Why is it here? Now that it's nicely defined, we will keep those things that really are not capital budget projects out of this, and they'll be into the budget and not thrown into an HVAC, whatever. Again, thank you very much. Very good project.
Thank you, Peter. I would just like to thank you as well for all your work, and this is much improved document over what we've been dealing with in the past. It does reflect all the time and the hard work behind it. And it's very systematic document, and it's a good guide. It's a good guide for anyone who's interested in the capital budget, even the committee itself. It's like a blueprint, really. It has that quality. And there's a lot of discipline, I think, behind this document, and there's specific criteria for evaluating needs of the town and what's going to get done now and what's going to have to wait. So it's very systematic, very well thought through, and much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we going to have a remote presentation on the tech school?
Yes,
We are?
we're going to have a remote presentation. We'd like to have all of our folks on the meeting promoted to panelists. And I'll try to assist with some of the slides if the presenters can indicate when they want their slides advanced. We're going to have the presentation up on the big screen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you please indicate when you're ready for me to start? And thank you very much for your help, Bob.
Tech launching. And we're good to go.
Thank you very much. And I cannot see the presentation, so I will have you advance the slides and hopefully we'll stay on the same page. Perfect, wonderful. My name is Erin Orcutt and I am the business administrator for the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. Thank you for having me here tonight. I do appreciate the opportunity to present our budget to you. Mr. Sanborn sends his regrets, but I am here on his behalf. I want to start by thanking the members of our finance committee who really were integral in working with administration, specifically Mr. Sanborn and myself, to develop this budget. Our finance subcommittee members are our chairman, Mr. Tullio, Mr. Bloomfield from Yarmouth, Dr. Michaud, and Stefan Galazzi of Orleans. Next slide, please. This is a quick snapshot of where our enrollment is this year in comparison to last year. As you can see, we have a total enrollment in FY24 of 664 students. That number is up 11 students over last school year. And you will note Yarmouth has increased by 1 student this school year. So your enrollment has gone up by 1 student. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just a quick demonstration of where the students from our district come from. As you know, our district is a 12-town regional district where our largest two sending towns are Barnstable and followed by Yarmouth. Yarmouth is contributing to 22.4% of our overall enrollment this year. Next slide. Again, I just want to show you some history of where our enrollment has been. It's easy to see that we are definitely on the incline as far as enrollment. In FY20, we had hit a low of 570 students. Luckily, we have been climbing up since then. And the high right now of 664, which enrollment-wise is a really comfortable number to be at. The building was originally built for 650 students. As you may know, that figure is 85% capacity. So we can go higher than 650. Where we are really is a good fit for the building, balancing our vocational and academic studies. Next slide, please. The budget that I am presenting to you in the town of Yarmouth is a 3.86% overall increase of the operating budget over FY23. That is reflective of a $623,000 increase for a total operating budget of $16,750,000. The 6-year history on the right-hand side, you can see that we have, I believe, been good stewards of taxpayer money. We have tried to keep our increases under 2%, with that one exception of FY21. Again, we did try to stay under 3% this year, but many cost drivers have had to inflate our budget to 3.86%. Next slide, please. So where does the money come from? We have 3 major revenue sources that fund our regional school budget. I would say the least contributor is local revenue. The $665,000 that we are dedicating from local revenue is mostly derived from our excess and deficiency fund. We are dedicating $600,000 from our excess and deficiency fund, which you probably know better as a free cash, where we will use that as a revenue offset. In addition to that, we are contributing $65,000 in rental revenue. We have 2 strong relationships where we rent portions of our property. One is the YMCA of Cape Cod, which, if you do not know, they are working to renovate a building on our property. And we are renting that building so that they can educate 47 infant, toddlers, and preschool students. They're in that building, providing another childcare option for folks in that area of the Cape. The other is with Cape Destinations, our busing company. State aid is contributing roughly $3.6 million to this budget. This is a significant uptick over last year. The Student Opportunity Act definitely infused our budget with more state aid than we had seen. And that is why the assessment number, although it is up slightly, has been significantly offset by the state aid rising. The next slide really just shows you a graphical picture of where our budget is versus the sources of revenue that fund it. It's easy to see the operating budget, the blue line. As it ticks up, typically in the past, assessments have gone right up along with it, but you will see again, because of the infusion of the state aid or the increase of the state aid is up and assessments, thankfully, are down slightly. Next slide. Again, the same information, just giving you a historical description of where our budget has been. And as you can see, this year we are coming in with a $16,750,000 operating budget. Next slide, please. So what do we use the money for? It's easy to see that about 80% of the overall budget ends up being spent on salaries and benefits for the folks that work there. having to maintain our own building that occupies about 9% of our budget, leaving very, very little that goes to consumables and support services for the students. But again, we budget very conservatively, fiscally conscious, and try to be conservative with our spending. Next slide, please. Again, this is the same information I just shared with you, but in a numerical fashion. It's easy to see that insurance benefits are a major cost driver of the budget, 11.4%. Healthcare is always a major issue. So we work really hard. Bob and I work really hard, I think, as members of the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group board to guide, I'm sorry, and David as well, Davidson, to be able to make very important decisions that affect our employees, that are major cost centers of our budget. Going to the next slide, I wanted to share with you where we are in our capital debt schedule. We are in year 5 of a 20-year fixed principal declining interest bond. We had a very favorable interest rate, and I'm very happy that the finance people in your town, as well as the other towns, really got together and encouraged us to be aggressive and go for that 20-year note, because I'm happy to say that we are a quarter of the way through the process of driving down that debt. You will see that in FY24, that number is 5.9 million. Next slide. And what that looks like for the town of Yarmouth is a capital assessment for FY24 in the amount of $1,325,533. And again, that number is based purely upon your enrollment of 149 students. Next slide, please. And this is our total assessments. As you can see, our operating budget would be an assessment to the town of Yarmouth in the amount of $2,724,141. Adding that debt that I had just previously said will bring a total assessment for debt and operating of $4,049,674. Next slide. I wanted to close by sharing something that Cape Cod Tech is very happy with, a collaboration that we have been a part of since 2015. We are part of the Plymouth County OPEB Trust. We benefit from the ability of pooling our capital with the capital of this multi-employer trust. Currently, we have, as of this report, it's about 2 million. Currently, we're at about $2.3 million in funding in our OPEB reserve. Our position is 13.38% funding to liability, which we've been told is very, very positive. We are continuing to fund this each year. We're, I believe, in year 6 of our OPEB funding schedule, where we are continuing to dedicate. Hopefully, we want to reach a $300,000 a year threshold, keep that, and then eventually take advantage of the sunsetting of the Barnstable County Retirement Association assessment and be able to use that to further fund this liability. So again, just something we like to share about our efforts to try to fund this future liability. That is the end of my formal remarks. I am looking forward to answering your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody from the public have any questions or comments? Chris Greeley.
I'm Christine Greeley, and as you know, I am one of the school committee members for the Cape Cod Tech. Norm unfortunately had a significant meeting that he had conflict tonight, otherwise he would be here, and he's been very important in terms of being on the finance committee. As a retired superintendent, he's offered, I think, a great deal of help. I simply need to commend Aaron and our soon to be Dr. Sanborn, Bob, for the efforts and the work they're doing. As you know, I'm a retired school administrator, and I used to have the responsibility for zero basing $11 million portion of the school budget for my department. And this work that is done by Aaron and by the team at Tech has been incredible, and it probably comes closest to zero-based budgeting that you're going to see anywhere. And the work that they do during the year with every single individual working in the school, every department, and coming forward to try to come through with this budget looking like it does. And I think it's very reflective that for a number of years here now, we've come in below 2%. And so that the whole issues at this point have to do with enrollment, which are going to continue to influence that. But I will tell you that this budget is not one that's developed on, oh, we got so much last year, let's just add a percentage on to this year's. It's actually done by a principle in which, what are we spending? What do we need for? Are you true? Is this truly what we need? And all I can do is commend the work that is done for that, because I think it's really being done for every single one of us as taxpayers in this community. And in the meantime, our kids are getting an incredible, incredible educational experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? We'll go to the board then, Mark.
I don't have any comments. Just thank you for the once again outstanding budget presentation and for all your really hard work in coming to us with a pretty bare bones budget. So thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, just a quick question. You mentioned you're working with the preschool program. Is there any thought for the school to reopen the preschool program that you used to have years ago when you would teach preschool teachers?
The short answer would be no. I don't believe with our school age population that we would pursue that again. We went through an extensive, as you know, we went through an extensive process of evaluating these shops and decided to cut down our shops by 2 in order to build a more compact building, something a little bit cheaper, but also be able to meet workforce, the needs of where the students want to go. That being said, I do believe there's opportunity for training during through our community school. We have a very robust community school offering numerous programs. And I believe that we could probably help with some kind of a training program. But really just our contribution is just, I guess, providing a revenue source to the taxpayers or for our budget and having them on in our facility.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Marcus?
On your budget, you have a provision for contract negotiations and a figure of 294,954 for FY24. Is that because you're going through contract renewal in that year?
Yes, we are currently in contract negotiations with all of our union and non-union employees. So we hope to be settled in the next month or so.
Okay, that was my next question. So it's all of the unions.
Everyone.
All of the unions, okay. And how long would the contract be for? Is that known at this time?
It is a 1-year contract.
1-year contract. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dorcas. Peter?
I want to thank the tech school for providing a good education and providing a good education for people living on the Cape and make a good living once they graduate. And it's a good bare bones budget and very well done and very well presented. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with Peter's comments and thank you very much for the presentation. The information is very clearly and logically laid out, easy to follow. And as usual, your budget is reasonable. and defensible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to the taxpayers. Thank you to the board. Thank you to the administration. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District. Budget presentation. We have Superintendent Woodbury live. And we're gonna hear from DY next. Yeah, adjust that any way you want, you know. I don't hear that that's working, is it?
It might be working now. How's that?
Bring it a little closer to you and try to speak into it
All right.
and adjust it any way that it works for you.
Okay, thanks very much. So before we get started with our budget presentation, you'll see the newest school in town up on the screen. We're very excited about that, but I want to extend an invitation to all of you and to the community members to come to the ribbon cutting. It'll be on Saturday, May 6th at 10:30 in the morning. And we'd love to have you there. And we're going to put out a little bit more information about that, about speakers, et cetera, coming soon. But we had to make sure that most everything would be complete. And we're happy and excited to see that a lot of it will be done by then. So we would love to have you all come and enjoy a day with us because it's pretty darn exciting. So now I'll turn it over to Dave Flynn, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Finance.
Good evening, thanks. I apologize. This is the exact same presentation we did for our school committee a couple of weeks ago. That's why the date said March 6th on the bottom and highlighted there as well. So when we started off, a large portion of our increase each year comes from Chapter 70, the state funding. And when we were developing the budget, the second part of that is what are the assessments to the towns relied heavily upon this. So this was intending to show that, we rely a lot on the governor's proposal in the budget in Chapter 70. The left-hand side is the revenue that comes directly to the schools, Chapter 70, charter school aid, transportation aid, school choice. Those represent $14.5 million in revenue. Then we also have assessments, just like the towns do, that comes straight off of our revenue for charter school assessment, school choice, special education assessment, part of school choice of 5.2 million. So I just point those out because those are two very large numbers, which are variables until the governor's budget was released on March 1st. So I couldn't have given the town, a preliminary assessment prediction until that came out. So we can go through the foundation enrollment over the years. So with our regional agreement, the costs above the minimum set by the state are based on the 5-year average of the previous 5 years. Those are the 5 rows shaded in gray. So for the years 2019 through 2023, Yarmouth has a 5-year average of 68.606%, and Dennis is 31.394. And if you looked, it's been creeping up a little bit each year as the students shift a little bit. Back in 2016, for that singular year, it was 64%. The numbers in this year are 69%. So there's been a little bit of shift over each of the years, and I actually have, since it's in a year in arrears, I already know what next year's split is going to be, and it's going to be 69.091% for Yarmouth. So it's going to go up another 0.4% on the split again next year. And again, it's all driven by the 5-year average of the enrollment between the two towns. So here it is a little bit more detail. The numbers that I was just showing and alluding to in the first slide, our state aid Chapter 70 money, up $1.6 million. Regional transportation up a little bit. Charter school reimbursement up only $5,000. School choice tuition up about $30,000. So for a net increase in the revenue of about $1.7 million, again, largely driven by the increase in Chapter 70. Our charges, special education portion of school choice down a little bit. School choice in and of itself down a little bit. charter school tuition up 100 and, 200,000 or so, I guess, actually. What I think is a good point on here is showing that our school choice tuition estimates are down. That's telling me that's roughly 30 students at $5,000 a student that are coming back in district. I don't think they've gone away. The overall enrollment is actually slightly up. So that tells me with that difference in school choice sending tuition going down, that approximately 30 students are now retained in our own schools. And I do think, getting back to the picture of the new school that's open, that enrollment compared to what the Matakees and Wixon separate enrollments were just a year ago is up. So I think that school is a draw in retaining students who, say, after grade 3 may have chosen to go somewhere else. They're now staying here with us. And we'll see if that trend continues, but at least in this current year, that's where I see the bump in our overall enrollment. Oops, sorry. I believe it ties to the decrease in the school choice sending number of students. So you net those two against each other. State aid revenue, state aid assessments, the school choice gives us our net amount of state aid. So our net increase in revenue to the district is $1,622,810. Now, when we look at the past 5-year history, DUI was seeing a decline. So in FY20 it was 5.6 million, it dipped to 5.2, it dipped to 5 million in FY22. Then we see this large increase in FY23 and another $1.6 million increase in FY24. That is all driven by, and you heard Aaron mention it, the Student Opportunity Act and the state targeting low income, high needs and special needs student subgroups and giving us additional funding in the formula to target the services that those children and families need. So that is directly is what's tied to the increase in FY23 and FY24. We're currently in FY24 will be year 3 of a 6-year implementation. So hoping to see a similar increase for at least the next 3 years beyond this year. So when we look at the Chapter 70 aid, you can see that the foundation enrollment in total is up 19 students. The foundation budget as calculated by the state is up $4.1 million. So it's much more complicated than this, but to start off, there's the required district contributions from both towns. So Dennis is required for next year, 12.5 million. Yarmouth required 25.5 million. And then in a nutshell, what's the difference between the required increase in the foundation budget and the required district contributions? That leaves 1.6 million remaining. So the state backfills the difference with the $1,610,000. So when I talk about the state and the Student Opportunity Act targeting subgroups and putting additional funding into that formula, the 2 rows I have down the bottom that are in red are economically disadvantaged students, 56.1%. And a high need student is a student that falls in any one of those categories above, which is a first language that's not English, English language learner, students with disabilities. So at 66.4%, you can see 2/3 of our entire student population falls into one of those categories. So we are a high needs district with our population, but the upside of that is the additional funding that we're receiving from the state. There are 12 levels of high needs that the state categorizes each town or school district into, with group 1 being the lowest amount of high needs, group 12 being the highest amount of high needs. We are in group 10 at 62.91% overall high needs. So out of, again, 12 groupings of high needs, we're 10 out of 12. As you can see in my point down the bottom. In group 10, for each student that categorized as high needs, in the Chapter 70 formula, it adds $6,579.86 to the foundation budget. So again, that's what's driving our increase in state aid that we've seen over the past 2 years, is that targeted amount down the bottom times the head count of the students that fall into those categories, as in addition to the base foundation budget. So what's the school district's priorities for next year? Well, we're coming into this wanting to maintain a level service budget. Now, by being level service, we want to retain all of our current staffing and then address contractual increases. So special needs tuition and services, transportation for regular day and special needs, health insurance, those rates to be set in February, which they were, property and liability insurance, facilities, grounds, utilities, and retirement and Medicare tax. So the chart is kind of small. I apologize. That's basically our FTEs of employees by building and by employee type. We have 563 employees, FTE employees. So to retain our entire current staffing for next year would be $1,883,098. Tuition and services for special needs. Now, you may have heard that the state OSD, Occupational Services Division, they are the arm of the state which sets the approved tuition rates for private school out-of-district tuition placements. Well, the state has historically approved an increase of 2 to 3% per year over the past 15, 18 years. Well, going into 24, the state has approved a 14% increase in those programs. The Department of Ed wasn't happy about that, but they said that's what was voted by the OSD. Those are the rates that are going through. These private schools really politicked for, retaining their own staff, their own costs going up, the cost of everything going up. They needed an increase to keep their programs running, and the OSD allowed it. So all of our students in private school out-of-district placements, those tuitions are going up by 14% next year. So we need to account for that. There's been talk about Governor Healy's budget. Those are the supplemental budget. Is it going to address this? How is it going to address this? There's been money put aside, but what has not come out yet is how do we apply for it? How and when will we receive it? There's the circuit breaker fund, which is for helping to offset high cost of special ed placements, but that's a year in arrears. You would incur the expense in 1 year. We file a claim, you receive a reimbursement in the following year. So if this works the same way, we wouldn't see any relief until 25 for the increased costs in 24. Again, the state just this morning was an email that they're not positive how it's going to work yet. So that being said, within the budget, we know the cost is going to be there. So within our special ed programs, that translates into $416,500 projected increase for next year. Tuition to charter schools and school choice is an increase of only $32,000. This current year that we're in now was actually an increase of $438,000 from the year prior. So I was actually happy to see that it's only going up $32,000 next year. Transportation for regular day and special needs. So our regular day contract, which was a 5-year bus contract, is up this June 30th. We're currently out to bid right now. I'll be receiving the bids back on April 3rd, I believe it is. So given the cost of diesel, the cost of drivers, the cost of everything, I've been talking to other districts that have gone out to bid within the past couple months. Everybody is seeing, unfortunately, a sizable increase in the lowest bids that are coming in for transportation. And then with the special needs transportation, we have an increased number of places that the vehicles need to go to outside of the bounds of our own district. Where we can, primarily if it's on Cape Cod, we use the Cape Cod Collaborative. They have a large fleet of transportation. But especially if the service is off Cape, they can't get the students there for us. Then we need to find a private contractor who's willing to come to Dennis or Yarmouth, pick the student up, drive them to wherever their placement is, go back in the afternoon, pick them up, bring them back home to Dennis and Yarmouth. The cost of that on a daily basis is through the roof, depending on where the placement needs to go and where the company is coming from that has the capacity to add you into their fleet of vehicles. So when you put those two together, we're expecting transportation to increase by $485,000 next year. Health insurance, just like, we're part of the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group, as is the town. Bob and I are both on the committee, so you probably already know the rates are going up 4% for next year. They'd originally said to expect an increase up to 8%, but when we voted in February, it was voted at 4%. So that represents along with the property and liability insurance increasing approximately 10%. You put the 4% on health insurance, 10% on property and liability, it's $351,800. Maintenance and utilities, we outsource our custodians in the schools. That contract is also up this June 30th. Trash removal contract, electricity and natural gas prices increasing. And there's a solar field next to the Wixon School, which is on Town of Dennis property. It helped to offset the cost of electricity at the Wixon building to the tune of about $50,000 a year. But to be quite honest, we're being told by the town of Dennis that since it's on Dennis property and the school's being turned back to them, they want to keep the solar field generating credits to a building within the town of Dennis and not letting the credits follow us to the new school. So I needed to add $50,000 to the electric utility line within the budget to offset the loss of those credits when I, essentially transfer the service from Wixon to the new school. The solar credits are staying with the old building, not following us to the new building. If you add all those together, it's $315,700. Retirement and Medicare, only a nominal increase of $22,000. The district has 4 pieces of debt that are outstanding. The bond from the high school issued in 2005. The final payment will be 2026. These are the total payments, not just the Yarmouth. Our total principal and interest on that's $453,000. The Ezra Baker bond, which was paid just by Dennis, $238,000. The first bond on the new DY Intermediate Middle School issued in 2021, going out 30 years to 2053. There's a payment of $2,190,919. Then we also did a 1-year ban, which will be interest only, due in 2024, of $979,284. This chart's a little small, but it's our budget broken up by the Department of Ed function codes as voted on by the school committee, administration, instruction, pupil services for the prior year's actual, this year's budget, and next year's request. I'd highlighted those 2 rows in green previously because those were budget figures that I had for my first prediction to the school committee. I was able to lower once the actual rates came out. The one being benefits and fixed charges. Once the health insurance rates were set at 4%, I lowered that figure to reflect only the 4%. The other one in green was when I was waiting for the governor's budget to come out, and the estimated amount for school choice and charter school tuition came in lower than I expected, so I was able to lower that figure as well. So I heard a figure before that stated that our increase was 6.1%. It's actually 5.1% in the operating budget, 5.11%. And you added, so an operating budget of $72,157,630. Debt service, those 4 pieces from the prior slide of $3,861,878 for a total budget of $19,508. This is kind of shows it graphically, those same Department of Ed function codes as to how the budget is broken down. You can see over 50% is direct instruction. And then following clockwise around pupil services, transportation, operations and maintenance, benefits and fixed charges. The green is quite a big pie. And then tuition to other schools, 12%, the next largest piece of pie. In administration, 3%. This is our just average per pupil expenditure. FY21 is the latest that the Department of Revenue, not the Revenue, Department of Education has published. You can see we're the 3rd lowest on Cape Cod, but right in there with Bourne, DY, and Monomoy are fairly close. Barnstable's the lowest and Nauset's the highest on the Cape. So now once we have the budget approved by the school committee, we have the revenue coming in from the state. We can get into how do we calculate the assessments for the 2 towns. So we start, the proposed budget, $76,019,508 in the top left. We take out the debt, it's $72,157,630. From there, we subtract out the state aid and local revenue that comes straight to us. Leaves an assessment of $57,493,930. From there, the first step is to put in the required minimum local contribution as set by the Department of Ed. We'll stick on the Yarmouth side, $25,546,149. And then row 5, that's the row that gets apportioned by the percentages at the top, which is a 5-year rolling average of foundation enrollments. So the remaining amount to be assessed above the minimum set by the state is $19,389,000 times the 68.606% for Yarmouth is $13,302,235 for a total assessment of operating assessment, 38,848,384. You follow that forward, add in the debt service, which is apportioned to Yarmouth, which is $2,336,804. Leaves a total assessment of $41,185,188. And then just to show how we get back to the total budget that it balances, you add back in the state and local revenue of the 10,060,000. That's for reference only. Portioning out between Dennis and Yarmouth brings you to the grand total, the bottom right box of the 76,019,508. So what does that look like as an increase in the operating assessments? So on the Yarmouth side, it's going up $979,219, which is just a hair over 2.5% at 2.586%. And then again, take the operating assessment plus the debt, the total assessment of $41,185,188. And this was just the motion that the school committee made on the budget. I would like to point out that I looked at your draft warrant articles online, and I did see that you had the total in there, the 41,185,188, but the numbers of the 38,848,384, I believe, was incorrect. The math did not add across when I looked at it. So I don't know if that just needs to be updated. Like I said, you had the correct total, just the two. That one number was off.
That the 38,815,894 is actually 38,848,384.
Okay. Because I did notice the total matched our voted amount, and very appreciative to see that at least the recommendation matches the school committee's vote. And we were happy to come in at, although a tick over 2.5%, right around that ideal target amount of 2.5%. I believe. And that was the last slides.
Thank you. Does anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? Vita?
Peter Morris, would you break out the 2 or 3 components of the Chapter 70 formula that contributed the most to producing the kind of result that occurred? I guess I'm driving, we're so used in Yarmouth to be the ones who are having a major increase, and now it's kind of flip-flop. So I'm kind of curious, which of the components of that formula contributed the most?
So contributed the most to the Yarmouth assessment on a percentage basis being 2.5%. Is that
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, for both of them, I mean, to arrive at that, the 2.58 for Yarmouth and 3.5 something for Dennis.
So you asked about Chapter 70 in the beginning. So the largest driver in the increase in Chapter 70 is that targeted amount towards, through the Student Opportunity Act, our high needs students.
Excuse me, could you speak to the microphone
sorry.
instead of keep
Yeah,
turning
I'm
back to
sorry,
her,
I'm
'cause
trying.
when you do that, it affects the volume.
Sorry about that.
That's
No,
not
that's
what I-
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, look at her, look at her.
Okay, no problem.
But just a minute, that's not what I was driving at. Remember, you said that there are these components such as real estate assessments or valuations and income and that kind of thing in each town that ends up in that Chapter 70 formula.
Okay, so I believe what she's referring to is the components that drive the minimum local requirement, which then feeds into the overall assessment. So the minimum local requirement as set by the state is driven by every single city and town's relative ability to pay based on a consistent formula that the Department of Ed applies to every single community. They take a percentage of your real estate values plus a percentage of the income of your residents and say, here's your theoretical amount that you can afford to pay. So with Dennis, property-wise being one of the most wealthy, we use that term relative on the Cape, with several $100 million more property value than the town of Yarmouth, that drives the formula where they say, Dennis, in theory, given your property values, you can afford more relative to the number of students that come from that town. So that drives their, probably to the tune of about $400,000 shift towards them versus Yarmouth based on the relative wealth of the two towns. So that's the single largest driver.
That was the same.
That's I might comment too, that's a very, very complex formula. When we had the various committees that were involved with the new school, we actually hired an expert. The two towns shared the fee for an expert to come in to explain your question. It's extremely complicated. And but it is a statewide systematic evaluation of property values and income.
Correct.
Because I remember in the discussions, if it weren't for the income component, I think Dennis actually has higher property values than Yarmouth does. And so I remember all those machinations, and it was like 25 or 3,500 bucks the town split to have this expert come in and explain it. It is an incredibly complex formula. But that number, schools have to spend that money on education, that number, and then the rest of it over and above that foundation number is governed by the regional school district agreement.
Exactly. That was the point I was trying to make on the slide with just the remaining 15 million or so.
Foundation enrollment number, it has nothing to do with the negotiation back and forth with Dennis and Yarmouth. It's a state mandated contribution.
All right, so
But it's very, I'm telling you, it is very, very complicated. Somewhere I have a file on it, and if I can ever find it and you've got 2 weeks to spare, I'll sit down with you and go over it.
No, but last night, Mr. Flynn actually broke out some of those components, and I just couldn't, keep up with it on the, but I remember that definitely the real estate values and maybe the income also to a certain extent. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. Anyone else? Okay, I'll go to our board members. Mark. Oh, who do we have?
I think Joe Glenn's got his hand up.
Joe, are you on? Yeah.
I am, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Would you like to be recognized?
I would.
Okay, you're recognized.
Okay, Joe Glenn from the school committee representing Yarmouth, but I just wanted to dovetail from what you were just saying about it being so complicated, but also to compliment Mr. Flynn. I've been watching, like you and many members of the community, the finances of the two towns and the machinations of the school committee and the finances. And I can tell you that David explains it better than anyone. I feel like I understand it now, even as complicated as it is. So it's just big kudos, and I've been watching it. I've been hearing other people explain it for as long as Superintendent Woodbury's been there, which, by the way, if you don't know, you might want to compliment Mrs. Woodbury because she's retiring. So I just wanted to point those two things out, that it's no coincidence that, there's stuff that comes down from the state, but these projections are very complicated. And when you're setting the budget up, someone like David, you have to project things out, and you don't know what you're getting from the state. You don't know how many students you're going to have. So setting these budgets ahead of time is very difficult, and it's no coincidence that Yarmouth is doing very well. And I think that's a testament to all of the administration, but specifically to Mr. Flynn. So thanks very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Mark.
First of all, it's good to see you both here. And I didn't know if that was I'm sure there was an official announcement. I don't know if you care to, would you like to speak to that?
At a school committee meeting.
Yeah, since you got preempted by Joe Glenn, why don't you tell us your version?
Exactly.
Well, this is my 18th year at DY.
Yeah.
And it has been really a privilege and an honor to be in the district. And I've worked with a lot of really terrific people here. And I really love working with Bob. One of the best I've ever worked with Bob, not just here in Yarmouth, but everywhere. 21 years as a superintendent, 34 years in education. It's time for me to spend a little more time with my family. So I'll be retiring on June 30th, but I want you to know that I am very grateful for the amount of time I've had here. And I think we've seen a lot of growth and improvement in the district. And one of the things that just happened recently is we're receiving a recognition up at the State House. I think it's April 5th, because we have increased the number of students in the low-income population and our students of color by 30% increase in students taking advanced placement. So we've been really working to raise the standards over the period of time. As Dave pointed out, we have a relatively, I don't know what other word to use except a population that really needs our schools. And, but we try to, our mantra is all means all. And so that means that every kid can make it. And it's just fantastic to see the number of kids, what they're going on to do and so on and so forth. I'll give you one stat. In 2003, was a couple of years before I got here, over 90% of our students were white. That year, 83 kids dropped out of school. Last year, in the current year, just under 65% of our students are white. And you know the low income population too. And last year we had 10 kids that dropped out, primarily kids that came to this country probably in their high school years. Parents really need them to work, not so much anything related to school, but just circumstances of their birth. So we're really proud of what we've accomplished. And I'd like to think that some of the success is not just a brand new, beautiful school building, but the hard work that's going on inside to make sure that all of our kids have a successful future. So thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, and I'm sure I speak for the board and wish you the very best going forward and an appreciation for your service. Mark?
You know, I think in looking at the moment that we're in right now, the time that we're in right now, I think we've had some challenging times and you've had to provide leadership during some very difficult times. And while it's tough to leave, you know, we're seeing some good things finally come together. And you know, we all have to make these types of decisions in our lives. And for you, I think to be able to make this decision, which I know it's not easy. You know, you have a passion for teaching. It's very evident in your work. You have a passion for education. You've been very dedicated in your service to this community, and it's very much appreciated. And it's tough letting go, but you know, it's at a time when you can see things changing and getting better and better and better. You know, it's remarkable. Some of us have had a chance to check out the new school. I'm looking forward to being there on the 5th. I have to commend you and the committees and the designers and everybody that worked on this project that had a hand in it, because it's a beautiful building. You've done an incredible job. And it's not just an asset to DY, it's an asset to the community as well. You know, we're so used to going to Mattakey, just thinking of town meeting in the new building when it's ready. I mean, this will be our last town meeting at Mattakey's, and there's a lot of history there, but this new facility is going to be just incredible for our town meetings.
I think in the old days, people told me that Chatham Corral used to perform over at the Mattakey School. So I think one of the things, certainly if I was still here, and I know the people coming after me will be looking forward to some ways that the school can be a real community center.
Well, I think, yeah, and that's the point that I was getting at is that what you've done is you've provided a venue that actually will provide a lot more service to the community. I anticipate that there'll be real demand to use that facility. That'll bring more business, more activity, more people to Yarmouth, particularly during times when, we're looking to to boost interest in our community and getting people to visit here. So I think that's going to be a huge help. I can't help getting back to the details now in terms of the budget. Who do I thank? Who do we send the thank you letter to finally on state aid to education and to regional schools? Who do we thank for getting it right?
Well, I think there's a lot of people, probably yourself included, in days gone by.
Yeah.
But I think it's really the passage of the Student Opportunity Act. And, just another little tidbit, all of the schools, we saw what every school was getting for the amount in the Student Opportunity Act money that included here. And obviously Barnstable is a very high needs district as well. So they were at the top of the scale. And ours was the 1.6 million. And after that came Cape Cod Tech with around 500,000. So you can see that your two schools on Cape Cod to have students to have a lot of needs. That's what drives up our cost a lot of times. We have to have those extra teachers for our English language learners. We're required by law to do certain things, however many hours we have to provide those sorts of services and things like that. We do it very pridefully, and we're very excited when our kids do really well. But those are cost drivers that sometimes other districts don't have. And so I was very pleased that in reality, the state said that our budget between the two town contributions and the state aid, that the budget could go up this year of 4.1 million. Our budget is going up 3.6 or 3.5. So there's a $600,000 gap. So I hope you see that as us trying to be fiscally responsible. We're not just like, oh, well, we could spend this much, so we throw something else in the budget. That's not what we did. We looked at what are we doing now? What do we want to keep doing? Is there anything we can get rid of and do it differently? And then through a whole methodical process came to this, ended up with this outcome with the help of the state.
Yeah. Well, it's so important that the state supports and provides the funding that's essential for the work that's being done at DY. And I want to commend you for, during some very difficult financial times, sticking to your guns and insisting that we support the kids and that we provide the services that they need. Because sometimes that kind of leadership is often difficult to do. And, you went through some challenging times. We all did. But the reality is, I think this boost in aid is a reflection, finally, of the importance of providing these kinds of services to the kids most in need. You've been saying, we need to do it. We need to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to find a way to do it. We're going to figure out a way to make the tough decisions. But to now see finally the state recognizing the wisdom of that thinking, I think is remarkable. The other question I have is there's been a lot of talk about the collaborative now being in Yarmouth. I just wanted you to have an opportunity to comment on the benefit and the upside of the Cape Cod Collaborative being here in Yarmouth and being located at the old MacArthur School.
Well, Maria Lopes is here. She's the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. And she and I had the opportunity to go over there and take a look at it with Paul. And we're really thrilled because as Dave told you about the transportation being a cost driver, it is a huge cost driver for us. And now with the school right here in town, we will clearly be able to cut down on some of our, what we call our out-of-district transportation costs with the building. There might be some other partnerships to help strengthen the programs, because there are often opportunities for teachers who have an extra block in their day, before we cut it all out. Maybe the English teacher spends a period a day or something over at the school giving those services. And I could see a lot of opportunities there to share those costs that will bring our costs down. You know how sometimes, you need X number of teachers, but maybe you really only need like 3/4 or half. But it's difficult sometimes to cut those positions in half because then who's going to do the job? We're all struggling with finding teachers these days. So I think it'll bring a lot of opportunity just in sharing those sorts of things. But the transportation, job one, absolutely.
Great. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I just have one last point. Did you want to add something?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is I've actually already spoken with the collaborative as, say, we have 5 students going to their program now, which is in Sandwich, and they're picking them up here, say in Yarmouth, and driving them there. I'm already trying to work out a deal, say, well, now that this program is going to be in Yarmouth, maybe with our own buses, we can get those 5 students there. But now you allocate that service back to me with your drivers and vehicles to some of these other places that we're having difficulty getting to. So that's, while it may not be an actual dollar savings, it's almost trading services that's going to provide us relief in, finding reliable transportation for these students to get off Cape, which was very difficult for us before, which maybe now they can do for it because they're freeing up several drivers for their own program, which is now in town, which will benefit us. So we're looking for that to be as a, an
great.
efficiency as well.
Yeah, no, that's very creative. My final comment is I want to thank the DY for this athletic hall of fame that's been established. In Yarmouth, we've had some great, we've had some great leaders in the athletic community, and to see the schools create this hall of fame to honor and recognize those people who've made significant achievements in sports, and particularly those mentors, the coaches that have really played an incredibly important role in mentoring the lives of so many young people. I think that's a remarkable thing. I think it's wonderful, and I just wanted to thank you for doing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I have to admit being a little staggered by the fact that we have 2/3 of our students that fall into that high needs category. I appreciate Barnstable's first. Can you help us understand why that is?
Well, I do think that wages, people who come here to work, they do a lot of different kinds of work. Some of them are very much service jobs. We need the immigrant population here on Cape Cod to provide all those services, working in our hotels, and we welcome them here, honestly, because they're really awesome people. But, so it takes a while for people to find their way when they first come to live here. I think that's part of it. I don't really know the whole story on all of the people's difficulties, but that 66% is the students who are in one or more categories. So it could be special needs, low income, English language learners, and honestly, those things just drive up some of the services. And so I don't know why it's that way.
Have you tracked
But-
those numbers? Have they been going through the roof?
Oh, yeah, we have tracked those numbers. I mean, the state requires us, when students don't speak English, there are a certain number of hours depending on their proficiency levels. They're tested by the state every year. We have to have a certain number of teachers to provide those hours for each of those categories. So, yeah, we're tracking that all the time, and our numbers are going up. And I can't give you off the top of my head a number tonight because I just don't have that in my head. But over the period of time I've been here, it's been significant.
Listening to your presentation earlier, however, it sounds like you've responded very well. Dropout rate is significantly dropped, and our students are doing better. How are we doing on standardized testing?
Pretty well. One of the things that I recently gave a presentation to the school committee, I talked about how education in most cases is at least a 13-year journey from kindergarten through grade 12. And sometimes when we look at reading scores at grade 3, we get very alarmed because you say, oh my goodness, they're never gonna, what are we gonna do? It's important that we get alarmed because that means we're gonna do something about it. But really and truly, if every single year, every teacher that they have adds their piece and a little bit more, eventually we get them into those advanced placement classes and beyond. We have applied, started
you know, we're a good partner with Cape Cod Community College. It's a really great place, and we're fortunate to have it here on Cape Cod. And so we have applied with the state to become an early college high school. We have a number of our students going to dual enrollment through Cape Cod Community College. So advanced honors classes, advanced placement, dual enrollment, all super important. And part of it is for kids to have a better understanding of the rigor of college work while they're still in high school, because what we're trying to do is increase the persistence rates once they get into college. Because you all know who've had children, and if they go to college, it's pretty expensive. If after a year they drop out, that was a huge, learning is never wasted, but it's hard to swallow that one. So we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that the kids are supported while they're here within our four walls, so to speak, so that they will be successful when they are outside of our four walls. And so if we get this designation, it'd be a really amazing thing. We'd be the only school on Cape Cod. And, you know, we plan on doing it up big for the kids too. You know, college lanyards, get to go to campus a few times, really feel like this is something important, because it really is. Their futures depend on it. So.
Thank you. It's so important that people hear the work that you people are doing over there. We don't hear enough of it, frankly. I really appreciate the work that's been done on the budget. To have it come in at 2.5 something percent in today's world with the inflationary costs that we're all experiencing is pretty impressive. So I thank you for that work. Just quickly, E&D, any of that go into the budget this year? What is the E&D amount currently?
So, okay, so currently it's not been certified for the most recent year. I've still been going back and forth with the Department of Revenue with some final machinations of it. However, going into it being calculated now, it was roughly, it's like 460, it was just under $500,000. It was 460, 480,000. I apologize, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it was for something, it was under 500,000. And to be honest, no, at this point, we were not applying any of it towards
That's
the
low,
budget next
actually,
year.
right?
Yeah, that's, less than, at 70 million, 1%, 700,000. So it's less than 1%.
Yeah, no, there have been years that it's been in the millions. So that strikes me as being very low.
When not this current year, but a year ago, over 700,000 of it was voted to be used towards making the first interest payment on the new school, so that did not have to be assessed to the two towns. So that was a big chunk that was used a year or so ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Dan Dukas.
Well, the last time I saw you two was standing outside the new school on the first day.
Watching the buses go by.
Watching the buses go by. It's working out. It's working out very well. And,
Yeah.
I can tell you from the perspective of one of the bus drivers, the kids are very proud of their new school. You can hear it in what they're saying, and kind of an upbeat and morale, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it all works out over the next year or so. And yes, I can see that being a big part of our community center as well, which is fantastic. Great work on the budget. Thank goodness. We don't have any Proposition 2.5 override on the schedule for this year. And Carol, thank you. Thank you for your service, and good luck with what you do in retirement. Watch out. You might become a school bus driver too.
I've actually talked about that. I thought maybe I would either be a lunch lady or maybe a bus driver, but I'm not sure I could really drive the big buses like you do.
I have to tell you, I love it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Dorcas. Peter.
Ms. Woodbury, thank you very much for all your service. Thank you for the budget. Couple of questions. Retaining teachers, are you having any problem retaining teachers and getting teachers, or is this something that you live and breathe with every single day?
We're having a devil of a time. And I don't think we're alone. And I have been participating with a group over in Dennis that has to do with housing. And I know you guys have done some really pretty fantastic things over here in Yarmouth to help with the housing situation. Unfortunately, this is actually, I appreciate you bringing it up, Mr. Smith, because it's another driver of our budget. We're having trouble. Remember in the old days, someone would retire and they're at the top of the scale. And we'd say, okay, well, we can depend on hiring someone just coming out of school and we'll save X amount of dollars. That's not really true right now because they can't afford to live here unless they have somebody that they can live with. Speaking of English language teachers, I have a wonderful English language teacher who came to our district, I think a year or two ago, probably a year ago. This must be her second year. She wanted to take the job. It was in the middle of the year. She had a doctoral degree and she had 12 years of experience. So that means she's in the top of our step, the highest salary. She could not find housing. And so finally, there was a teacher who heard about it and had some kind of an apartment or something attached to their home. I don't really know. I think it was over a garage, to be perfectly honest. She took it because she wanted the job.
Sure.
So we're struggling with all kinds of people, like finding school psychologists, finding speech therapists, finding occupational therapists, all of those specialty fields. Sometimes we're having to outsource that to, what are they called, Maria? Telehealth, which is not the ideal environment for little kids.
There was a genesis to that question. I knew that you were going to say something about housing, and one of the things I wanted to bring up is the importance of housing, workforce housing, and we need to do something in order to have places for people to live on the Cape. So I led you down the garden path on that one. So you answered perfect.
You had a 95 on that test.
Right. Chime in with one thing on that.
And,
I just want to say, I am also aware of another one of our employees that the cheapest housing she could find was almost 50% of her pay.
Yeah.
So that's not, it doesn't bode well for the person or trying to attract somebody, unfortunately.
Right. If your housing costs are more than roughly 30% of your income, it's not sustainable because, things happen and you can't afford it. My other question is on the charter schools and private schools. It looks like with the programs you're putting in, you're trying to retain some of those people that are going to the charter schools. Is that showing to be a positive effect in retaining additional students?
I wouldn't say so much versus the charter schools, but certainly say, as opposed to a student going to a collaborative program with another building or a school choice out to one of the other districts with what we can provide in-house now and some of the programs we have, I would say so. So I don't want to make that assumption with charter, but certainly I would say with school choice, collaborative, or other private schools, yes, if we have the number of students that warrant, say, hiring a teacher and a paraprofessional versus sending 3 students out to another district at 40, 50,000, well, then it makes economic sense to say even create that program and hire those people. But when you have a student whose specific need is very individual, well, then maybe it doesn't make sense to try and accommodate that student in district. We would love for them to be there, but then if you need 2 adults for 1 student, well, then, financially, maybe it doesn't make sense. But where feasible, if we get the numbers, you get 3, 4, 5 kids that all require similar services, I think Maria could attest to that. And that's when we look at it and say, can we do this? Do we have the space? Can we put it somewhere? It's better for the kids, and in the long run, it costs less money.
Excellent. Again, thank you very much. Good presentation.
Thank you. When Mark brought up the collaborative, it reminded me of, I don't know what the exact date was, but Bob, you might know, but Karen Green and I took a tour of the former MacArthur School and saw the work that they've done to that building. They're putting in tremendous money. And there are millions of dollars of upgrades in that building. It's, you won't recognize it if you go in there. It almost looks like from the inside, a new facility. And even the basement, they've renovated all of that area as well. It's, they have there is one problem with water due to the changing with the excavation and everything. There was a small area where they were trying to fix it up with the contractor, but other than that, I couldn't believe the work, and they've enhanced that asset, I think, for the town. Someday, if that facility does revert to the town, I can tell you it's gonna be worth a lot more money than they got it. It's incredible, the amount of work that they've done. And Karen in her humor took a picture of me in the timeout room. There's this sign across the door. But they have all kinds of different breakout rooms for kids with different issues and things like that. And they answered questions about, what part of the building was used for what use. It was really incredible, the amount of work and planning that's been done in that building. And my kids went to that elementary school, and I remember back in the day, my friend Larry MacArthur being out there every single morning, rain, snow, whatever, in the back of the building when the buses came in. He would shake hands of each student that came in with a big smile. He was an incredible guy, and he made a really nurturing environment for these kids. I'll never forget those images of him, and that's why that school has special meaning to me, and I'm glad to see it being used for those kinds of salutary purposes of rearing these students that have these special needs. The state finally, as Mark brought up, got around to taking into consideration the composition of the school population, especially with English language learners and kids that have come from immigrant families that probably don't have a lot of the basic needs that they need to have fulfilled and still have to go to school at the same time. But it comes to like about, if my memory serves me correctly, that bump comes to about $1.7 million, which, although helpful, is not a meteoric number by any means. And I can see that with those populations, you'd have ELL needs certainly that would have to be addressed. But do you know what other components that are being taken into consideration for that extra money, and or where it's spent other than on ELL?
I would say some of the things are, especially since the pandemic, we've had to bring in other teachers that we call them interventionists. So kids are getting a little bit of extra time with somebody who specializes in reading or even math or things like that. So as you can imagine, and many of you know people who teach, but a classroom of 20 little first graders with some that don't speak English, some that really, nobody's been reading to them at home because they didn't have any books, and, whatever else might occur. So it's really the academic pieces too that we have to pay attention to, and trying to give kids extra, we still offer reading recovery in our first grade levels. And that's a one-on-one tutorial for 20 weeks to try to get them up to the reading level that they should be in. In addition to that, our social workers, school psychologists, people like that are certainly very busy. The effects of the pandemic and of our kids staying home for a period of time are large. And,
Yeah, and these kids that are learning English for the first time also have to be struggling with trying to learn these other disciplines
exactly.
in the English language, like math and science. And I mean, I can't even conceive of that.
Yeah.
I've studied languages before, but as a language, I studied my other disciplines in English, which I knew. But just imagine somebody that's English speaking, that you go to a school and you're studying Portuguese, for example, or Spanish, but you have to learn math in
Yeah.
Spanish, and you have to learn science in Spanish. That's a challenge.
Our teachers have special training so that they can shelter the English immersion.
Yeah.
It's called sheltered English immersion. And so they know how to make the language in English. They hook it to other things so that the kids can eventually learn to speak English along with learning to do the other subjects. There's no bilingual, there's no, put it on your phone and translate, not in the classroom. So our teachers are specially trained. They've gone through special training. It's required by the state. And they do a pretty amazing job because you just can't imagine how well the kids perform after a while.
Yeah, you were talking about how when you first started, I think you said the white population was something like 90%. And that in and of itself isn't the real meaning. Everybody spoke English.
Right.
All those white people spoke the same language, so you didn't need all these other support services and things like that you need today. The dynamics of education have changed radically. And there's a lot of social problems, teachers are dealing with today that weren't all those years ago, at least not to the same level they are today, so anyway, thank you for your budget, and we wish you the very best in your retirement, and thank you for the service to the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District.
Thanks for having me here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next item. We have District Improvement Financing, otherwise known as DIF, D-I-F. Before we scare everybody, it's not gonna cost you anything. It's just an allocation of future revenues as a result of growth.
Bill Scott, Assistant Town Administrator. And what I'm going to do is go through the presentation we provided last year at the town warrant to catch people up on where we started. Last year, we came in and we identified the properties that would be included in the district. And those properties pretty much emulate the Phase 1 project. They emulate the betterment district that we're developing, except they add a few properties that we believed that would be potential growth properties that may not be in the original betterment district or the sewer district, that they can be reached with extensions and possibly create more growth. But DIF is purpose of the DIF is to establish a dedicated revenue stream from new growth to support infrastructure investments within the designated district. So what that means is, and new growth is defined very specifically with a DIF. It's under Chapter 40Q. And what it says, and to break it down in a very simple terms, you need a hammer and you need to create something new. That is, you need to build something to have new growth. So replacing windows, flooring, things like that, where